Morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be a pretty decently long video regarding the current threat assessment to the United States involving jihadist actors internationally. And I'm going to read from a couple of reports and try to build a narrative of what I think is coming to the United States, actually. And again, I'm not predicting that this is going to be the way it is. I'm just trying to give you a feel and understanding of what could come regarding a response to U.S. foreign policy. Unlike uh, the years 1988 to 1993, for example, before the bombing of the first World Trade Center, we didn't have the internet and we didn't have up-to-date information. Now we do. And so I feel that with the latest videos that we have, which are basically, an array of messes, right wing, left wing, Christian, Muslim, white and black, and all this divisive nonsense that continues to tear apart the fabric of American society. I think the real threat is what we have to start looking abroad about what's coming here, like a contraction of sorts. Um, let's take a look at the article from the Office of Intelligence and Analysis for the Homeland Threat Assessment from the Office of Homeland Security. As you can see, this is 2025. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I want to go down and read a portion right about near the end. Right, what's the it's all the way near the end here about the threat assessment to the United States in that all right, terrorism, right? It's page 2. I'm sorry, I thought it was down more. So, and this is important because it's basically warning about the latest threat assessments domestically and internationally. Now, as you could read here, I'll blow it up just a little bit more so you could read it as well. And of course, I'm going to link this in the bottom in the description for you to read. And I think it's important for you to have. Looking into 2025, the threat of violence from U.S. based violent extremists, including DVEs, which is domestic violent extremists, who are motivated by various ideologies, and FTO, foreign terrorist organizations, FTO, inspired homegrown violent extremists. Now, we do have violent extremists here in the United States, talking about politically affiliated extremists. And whether you want to say they're left and right, I just think these are misguided, victimized, brainwashed people who believe that there's something noble about committing acts of violence because you believe a set of standards should exist. And because your fellow neighbor doesn't have those set of standards, he's considered a threat. Now, we are like very close, I think, to precipitating violence upon ourselves based on political goals, which is the very definition of terrorism. Similar to that. And, you know, if you left it up to the powers, the powers of the Conservative Party or the Democratic Party, is it realistic to believe that if they did away with, say, the Declaration of Independence or the Geneva Conventions or the Bill of Rights, the preambles along with it, do you think that they would consider those who fly a red or blue flag terrorists? Yes. Because you already see each other that way. We're not, and I mean, like, I'm not using Twitter and Facebook as the example. I'm talking about in the streets. It may not seem that way, but it's in the heads. They're not saying it. That's the next step. And I think what's going to take what the next step is what I'm predicting coming up. Now, it all could be just basically, hogwash, nothing more than fanaticism. But I'm not one to post, inflammatory material unless I think it's, it could be realistic. Well, you'll let me know. You're the viewer. We particularly are concerned about the likelihood of violence motivated by developing domestic and global events. Yes. I mean, Trump supporters go on OAN and Fox and Tucker Carlson, and they basically tell you that liberals are a danger to society, and you're getting people that basically looking at their neighbor who may have a different look about them and have a Biden flag, in front of their yard and say, this is the person that allows open borders and allows for deviant sexuality. And I think they're a threat to the American fabric. And what do they believe? The conservatives believe that, God's a white man and he believes in guns and liberty and the freedom of liberty. And what I consider Democrats and Republicans brainwashed. I can make that argument, and I could probably win in a debate setting. The happy medium is in between. It doesn't exist in the left and right narrative, because when you look at it in the context that I'm looking at it from the outsider point of view, because I don't consider myself Democrat Republican, I don't believe in these divisive constructs, is that there is no such thing. But there is such a thing as believing in a set of ideologies that acquiesces to your worldview because you've been brainwashed most of your life to think this way. If say, for example, a person born in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, went to a Catholic school, and he's going to cater to that set of that culture. Hey, this is normal. And when he runs into somebody from, say, San Francisco, who, votes Biden and believes in a traditional liberal worldview, this guy who knows nothing about that traditional worldview because he's getting his news from Fox or whatever, right? He's going to consider him alien, right? We're already there. And now flip the script. You get somebody from Seattle raised in a liberal household, looks at a conservative and says, look, it's a dumb Trump supporter. He's a fucking enemy. He's a fascist. Not every Trump supporter is a fascist. Not everybody's the same. If you step outside that worldview, and I don't want to dissuade from the overall point, but I'm trying to make it clear for you that there is no such thing as left and right and black and white, and never was. You just got to break free from these chains. I've done videos about this in the past, right? So that's what I mean about domestic violent extremists groups that these people belong to, right? So if I go down a little bit more, targeted violence, right? And it talks about chemical warfare, chemical illegal drugs, a threat to the sensitive areas of the infrastructure of the United States. And they're talking about domestic and international groups like Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. And it's something that Sarah Adams had touched on when I interviewed her. And I think that makes the most sense regarding the current threat matrix and what is the threat. And the threat is that it basically is coming from the United States now and abroad. Now, this is from the Congressional Research Institute. All right. And this is U.S. policy responses. Now, this was the latest was Al-Qaeda background, current status, and U.S. policy. As you can see, this is May 6th, 2024, almost a year ago. Okay. Just about a year ago. All right. Now I'm going to read this part. U.S. campaign against Al-Qaeda. Now, Al-Qaeda exists in various areas. All right. Al-Qaeda exists in specific areas in Afghanistan. Now, of course, without pullout in 2021, when the United States pulled out in 2021 after a 20-year war with the Taliban, in which the Taliban took control of the country, and we left behind hundreds of millions of dollars in weapons for them to form an army, which, by the way, you can either say was malfeasance or intentional. It's not a bad conspiracy, because what happened? Taliban along with Al Qaeda and what was left of them, regrouped. And now they have a standing military, thanks to the weapons we left behind and the training camps that they've had. And they reached out. And then you have, people like Sadrullah Jean Haqqani, Hakam Abdullah, the leader of the Taliban, Hamza bin Laden, who was considered dead, but he's now alive, Saad bin Laden, the same Saad bin Laden that was in Iran, and where in 2006, 2003, Iran made a deal with the United States saying, we'll hand over Saad bin Laden to you. And the U.S. rejected the deal. Why? Because they could always say that Al-Qaeda is in Iran. And what happened 20 years later? What are we saying to Iran? They're the biggest terrorist threat in the United States. They export terrorism. Al-Qaeda's there. Saif al-Adil and Hamza bin Laden, they were under house arrest. Saudi Arabia didn't want them. Afghanistan didn't want them. They were stuck there. And they considered them more of a threat if they released them to say, Tajikistan or Pakistan or Waziristan, right? Or even Yemen, where the bin Laden family is originally from. So if they were to release them, here's more terrorists being released. At least they're being monitored. Their phone calls are being, everything, being monitored, closely watched. But it's like, they're a no-win situation. Nobody wants them. Why? Saif al-Adil's a fucking wanted terrorist. Saad bin Laden's a wanted terrorist. Come on, folks. Use your head. What do you think is going on here? Right? So the U.S. campaign against Al-Qaeda now in its third decade spans a wide array of policy areas. The United States has conducted airstrikes on Al-Qaeda targets in at least 7 countries since 2012. In 2021, the United States removed military forces from Afghanistan in Operation Enduring Sentinel as the U.S. mission to conduct over-the-horizon counterterrorism operations from outside Afghanistan. Like I said, Al-Qaeda exists in Afghanistan. They exist in Yemen. They exist in the Arabian Peninsula. They exist in North Africa, in Libya, in Sudan. Okay, Yemen. I said Yemen. Iraq. Okay. According to the current threat matrix, they're acting in accordance with one another. And that's something that, once again, the Transnational Atlantic Institute, Sarah Adams and William Archer did phenomenal work about gaining intelligence from inside sources about the latest threats to the United States. Coming from here, and I'm going to read some of that to you in an article by none other than the fucking Mirror. That's right, some of these rags come out with a fucking breaking article once in a while. That's why you can't dismiss everything at once. You have to look. I'm not defending the Mirror or the Independent, or the New York Post or the New York Times, for God's sakes. But you can't just say everything is all fucking false like the 9/11 Truth Movement did with the 9/11 Commission Report, because you won't know what's in there. Because when you're faced with a singular point made, and you're just dismissing the entire story as a whole, you don't even know what you're dismissing. I just know 9/11 is an inside job. Okay, explain to me what was an inside job about it. What you disagree with the 9/11 Commission Report? It's the reason why I read these reports to you, so you could be informed. I'm not saying the 9/11 Commission Report's the truth. I'm saying to you that here's the report, read it, and find out what's wrong with it. It takes time, doesn't it, to research? That's why the 9/11 Truth Movement is fucking dead. Earlier that year, President Trump ordered the withdrawal of U.S. forces from Somalia. And you could blame Biden and Trump all you want, because as you could see, when it comes to geopolitics, there is no such thing as left and right, ladies and gentlemen. Israel is a prime example of this, right? Yeah. Okay. They ordered the redeployment in 2022. Over 1,000 U.S. forces in Niger conducted intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance and security operations until a 2023 coup. And in April of 2024, U.S. officials started plans to withdraw troops after the ruling junta rescinded the U.S. status of forces agreement. This allows for Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Boko Haram, which is an Al-Qaeda affiliate, As-Sahab, which is an Al-Qaeda, As-Sabab, which is an Al-Qaeda affiliate, to coexist, which makes them far more fucking dangerous instead of the ideological differences which separate these groups, whether from the ruling ulema, the religious authority within these groups, because they have like a military, committee and a ruling shura committee, which is a religious committee, which, has these preambles that are, divisive with one another. Now they're saying we have a fucking common enemy. The enemy is the Christian and the Jew, with the Yahud in Arabic, right? Because they're the ones who are creating what? The problems out west. Hey, listen, this is the point I'm getting at. Our foreign policy is creating for these groups to coexist like never before. Now, you will see policymakers also to combat Al Qaeda and other terrorist groups by addressing the drivers of extremist recruitment, by blocking the financing of Al Qaeda and its affiliates through sanctions and other tools. The sanctions never work. Why? The sanctions only hurt millionaires, people with money. Al Qaeda gets their money illegally. The governments, which allow for these organizations to exist, they are also millionaires, where the people in these countries, like the Sudan, Niger, Yemen, they're poor. That's who the sanctions hurt. And this is all made the sanctions are made to drive the Muslim, the poor Muslim, to basically either die, barely exist, or join these terrorist affiliates. And then you have a reciprocating war on terror, don't you? It never ends. Congress has addressed the enduring presence of Al-Qaeda affiliates through the oversight of executive branch counterterrorism policies and practices, as well as the authorization and appropriation of U.S. funds for counterterrorism activities. Periodic deliberations in Congress about the repeal or revision of the 2001 authorization of the use of military force, the AUMF, may also have implications for U.S. efforts against Al-Qaeda and its affiliates. Now, you take away that article. Let's talk about what drives these groups. What is motivating these groups? Well, we know it's their hatred for the West. But why are foreign governments supporting them? Here. Phenomenal article by one of the best, Dave DeCamp from the Libertarian Institute, antiwar.com, which is basically, our saving grace for real unbiased journalism. Israel is arming an ISIS affiliate gang in southern Gaza. Not new when you think about, if you go back in the past articles, when the Arab Spring happened in Syria, right? Israel was treating al-Nusra fighters, an Al-Qaeda affiliate, where, by the way, Abu Muhammad al-Jalani came from, which he renamed to Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, who's now the president of Syria, a terrorist. Yes. We're not living in Bozo land, right? Israel's arming, by the way, in Israel was treating al-Nusra fighters in the Golan Heights in hospitals guarded by the Israeli military. Why? Because they were fighting a common enemy, which was the Assad dynasty. Why? Because the Assad dynasty kept who in check? The militants. Same thing in Libya. Same thing in Iraq under Saddam Hussein. And why did we destroy these countries? You ever notice we went to war with Shia, Alawite-led governments because they're the ones who kept these Arab farm-backed militants in the jails, and that there was no presence in these countries. Now you look at these countries that we bombed, the U.S. and the coalition partners, with support from the Gulf, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, full unblemished support, including some involvement. Countries like Libya, under Muammar Gaddafi. We killed them. Now the country's under, sectarian violence from ISIS and Al-Qaeda affiliates and the local government, transnational government that's, trying to fight for the country. Syria. Finally, Assad's gone now. Now, look, a terrorist is in charge. And the left is basically saying, oh, well, we didn't want that. Well, that's bad. But at least Assad's not there. And the conservatives quiet about it because Israel's backing them, right? That's why there's no such thing as left and right. Afghanistan. We pull out in 2021, which was what we wanted all along, but we didn't want was the terrorists to take over the country. In fact, and I'm not sounding rude, you just basically spit on the graves of all the people that died in Afghanistan, including the Afghans and the U.S. military, for fighting for nothing. Iraq. ISIS Khorasan exists in this country, which is an offshoot of the Islamic State. They're fighting against Al-Qaeda backed affiliates, which there was a split in 2007 between Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri and then Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, or maybe it was in 2005, and they've been at war ever since, along with the governments and the foreign armies that are basically trying to bring stability in the region. Which we don't bring stability at fucking anywhere. So please. So this is the foreign governments, U.S., Saudi Arabia, Israel, are fermenting the growth of these organizations. Now, this is what Dave DeCamp had to say. Israeli opposition leader and former defense minister Avigdor Lieberman said on yesterday, that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was arming a gang in southern Gaza that's affiliated with the Islamic State, a charge that has been confirmed by Israeli officials. Quote, the Israeli government is giving weapons to a group of criminals and felons identified with the Islamic State at the direction of the prime minister, end quote. Lieberman said, to my knowledge, this did not go through approval by the cabinet. Of course not, because it's a covert operation. Just like the CIA was leading a covert operation in Syria called Timber Sycamore, in which I reported, and you could see those videos in my playlist of, the latest news playlist, where it was supported by who? Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Israel, Jordan. Lieberman compared the arming of the criminal gang to Netanyahu's previous strategy of propping up Hamas to counter the Palestinian Authority. Why? Because with the Palestinian Authority was considered the greater danger than Hamas. Hamas can be controlled because who controls Gaza? Israel. The Palestinian Authority is in the West Bank, and Israel controls that. But they're the least violent. Hamas is an ultra-Salafist group. No one can guarantee that these weapons will not be directed at Israel. We have no way of monitoring or tracking them. There's a reason for this. Because later on, we are going to war with these, and I'm going to talk about this in a bit, where all these groups are going to coexist, fighting against the United States and Israel. An initial statement released by Netanyahu's office denied the allegation. Israel is acting to defeat Hamas in diverse ways upon the recommendation of all heads of the security establishment. You know how easy it is to destroy Hamas? All they need to do is go to Qatar. But they need Hamas to exist in order to liquidate and force out the rest of the Gazan people out of Israel altogether. That's the Hannibal Directive. Part of it anyway, right? Now, thank you, Dave DeCamp. Now, this is a Brookings article about, because we talked about Israel, this U.S.-Saudi counterterrorism relation. This is the reason why we can't trust Saudi Arabia. I've been telling you this, I don't know how long. I don't care whether Mohammed bin Salman, who's the de facto leader under his invalid father, Mohammed bin Salman, King Salman, where they're being forced to moderate, right? Moderate the entire kingdom. Hey, listen, this is what the United States basically said to them. Listen, we know you're involved with 9/11. We'll continue to protect you by classifying certain materials. And if you want us to do that, you have to reform. So they did just that. So now they basically said, all right, to the Ulema, the Salafists, the Ulema, the Wahhabis, the leaders of these, the ruling religious edicts, they basically said, listen, shut it down for a while, or else we'll fucking imprison you and kill you. Now, here's the key distinctions of what they feel is considered troubling about the Saudi Arabian government. Understanding Saudi Arabia's relationship with terrorists, however, is far more difficult than assessing Iran's backing of terrorism, which is open, extensive, and state sponsored. Much of Saudi support is done by non state actors. Yet, being non state does not absolve the Saudi government of responsibility. These non state actors enjoy a range of relationships to the Saudi regime. Some receive or did not receive official patronage. Hey, is that the reason why they're going against the Houthis in Yemen? Who's also against the Houthis? Israel and the United States. Who are the Houthis fighting? Saudi-backed fucking extremists. Some receive or did not receive official patrons. Others, particularly those tied to leading clerics in the kingdom, are embracing indirectly by the regime's self-proclaimed role as defenders of the faithful, the Wahhabi, right? And still others are truly private, acting independently of the government and in times in opposition to it. Because as long as you suppress the minority, you create what? Extremism. And so what's going to happen is as long as the ruling elite gets fat and everyone else gets poor, or they're being debased, or having their civil liberties expunged, you're going to have a backlash. It's almost like they create the same problems. But these people are so fucking ignorant. In addition, the Saudi royal family itself occupies an unusual role. In one sense, the royal family, with its tens of thousands of princes, we don't know the exact number, from the seven, the Sudari seven is what they're called, the seven sons of the founder of Saudi Arabia, Ibn Saud. It's not the government. However, the family and the government's finances are interwoven. And if a prince supports a group, it has an unofficial imprinter of approval. King Salman himself, for example, helped raise money for the Mujahideen in Afghanistan and the Balkans. And before him, it was King Fahd. Many of these voices are responsible for indoctrination rather than direct violence. You don't need to have direct violence. You need to manipulate and oppress people. And it works. This is to say that this might propagate views on the satanic nature of Jews, the apostasy of the Shia, or the heretical nature of the Alawites, and the legitimacy of using violence to fight foreign occupiers of Muslim lands, be it in the Indian forces in Kashmir or the U.S. forces in Iraq or Israeli forces in Palestine. Such support in the United States would often be considered distasteful, but part of protected free speech. For terrorists, however, it could prove invaluable. And this is really fucking key. Listen to this. For terrorists, however, it can prove invaluable as it provides theological legitimacy for their actions, enabling them to attract recruits and funds. Need I remind you what's happening in Gaza, the worst in Gaza in history? Need I remind you what's going on in Yemen? Need I remind you in Syria? Need I remind you Libya? Need I remind you Afghanistan? And who's involved in all this? Israel and the United States and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Ladies and gentlemen, it's just putting the dominoes up, adding two and two together. I'm not making things complicated. I try not to, but I try to give you the whole big picture without being prejudiced so that you can make the decision about, what to know rather than what to believe. Now, this is a crisis map. Okay, the current threat matrix in every country, right? Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Afghanistan. Let's go to Afghanistan. This is the latest. This is May 2025. Pakistan continues its deportation drive of Afghans, posing challenges to the Afghan authorities while embarking on a diplomatic offensive to improve ties with Kabul. The key thing is deportation. The Afghans who are not involved with Taliban, who are not involved with Al-Qaeda, are trying to get out of the country. And who's basically mixing in with these people? So they can't fly on the planes, they need ID for that. And if they're trying to basically escape or mix in to mimic an escape to try to involve themselves in a foreign country to conduct terrorist actions, they would pose as a refugee. I'm just a refugee. I'm trying to escape an oppressive regime, albeit Syria, albeit Afghanistan, albeit Sudan, Niger, right? Now, what's going on in, say, Libya? The most intense fighting in years rocked the capital of Tripoli, undermined the authority of the Prime Minister Abdul Hamid al-Bala, the National Unity Party, fighting against the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, As-Sabab, the AQAP, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. It's a mess. Libya is a mess. Thank you, Hillary Clinton and Samantha Powers and Susan Rice, for destroying a country that didn't have a problem. Now, Iraq. Authorities expanded cooperation with Turkey as the Kurdistan Workers' Party announced its disarmament, while Baghdad hosted an Arab League summit overshadowed by a dispute with Kuwait. I wonder why. Is it because Turkey and Yemen, the governments are basically trying to say that, these opposition parties to us are a bigger threat than the Salafist Wahhabi organizations? The caliphate is growing. I never saw this in my whole life. Caliphate's growing right here, right here, right here. Syria. What's going on here? In historic moves, U.S. President Donald Trump lifted all sanctions on Syria. I'm not a coincidence. I'm not a coincidence theorist. I'm sorry. I'm not involved with Alex Jones or InfoWars or these dumb, alt media. They gave themselves out. I don't have no appropriations. I have no respect for alt media anymore. Sold out. You guys had your chance 2 or 3 years ago to break out. No, you sided with Trump, and you basically did that to spite the left. Now you're bitching about the breakup between Elon Musk and Trump, and I think you're all a bunch of fucking hypocrites, including some of you in the Libertarian Party, right? I warned about what was going on in the Libertarian Party 5 years ago. Nevertheless, now we removed the sanctions here because now a terrorist in charge. His name is Ahmed al-Shara. I'm sorry, no, he's not. His real name is Abu Muhammad al-Jalani. He's a terrorist. He's Al-Qaeda. Hey, folks, right? Mexico. Criminal violence persists with the assassinations of two ruling party officials in the capital of Mexico City and relentless factional fighting in Sinaloa. Mexico prepared for judicial elections June 1st. Why am I pointing this out? I'll show you why. Now, where's the threat coming from? The threat's going to come from Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, working in accordance. Now, this is the mirror. Osama Bin Laden's supposedly dead son now commanding Al-Qaeda plans and has terrifying plans. Who considered Hamza Bin Laden dead? The State Department. Who did the State Department release sanctions on? Abu Muhammad al-Jalani. Who is the State Department coordinating with in Syria? Al-Qaeda. Who is the State Department coordinating with in Yemen? Al-Qaeda. See where I'm going with this? They're the ones who destroyed the countries that were fighting against Al-Qaeda. We didn't kill Soleimani because he was a threat to Trump. We killed him because he was the biggest threat to Al-Qaeda in Iraq and Islamic State. Him and the Russians. Say what you want about Putin. He's a mass murderer. I'm not afraid to say it. Piece of shit belongs under the Hague. But we weren't fighting him, to free Ukraine. You people on the left fell for that. You fell for that. We were killing him because he was a threat to the growing caliphate. Now I'm sorry, it's a caliphate in Syria. It's a caliphate in Afghanistan. We have two countries now under the direct leadership of a terrorist organization next door to each other. We're trying to destroy Iran so that the Shia are totally dead because what will be left? Wahhabi. And we can always go to war against them once, and we will. We will go to war against Al Jilani in 10 years. Guaranteed. Guaranteed. Willing to bet my life on it. Osama Bin Laden, supposedly dead son, now commanding Al-Qaeda and has terrifying plans. New intelligence shows that before he died, Bin Laden laid the groundwork for his sons to involve the terrorist network Al-Qaeda and is once again hell-bent on spreading chaos all over the world. Now, as you can see, this is an article dated September 12, 2024 by Chris Hughes. This is a recent article, right? A supposedly dead son of Al-Qaeda chief Osama Bin Laden is commanding the evil network that has built a chilling militant dynasty. Sarah Adams has already reported on this. So has William Archer. There's a great account tracking the base. Great. Analysis suggests Bill Roggio, these are the best. Analysis suggests Hamza bin Laden, known as the Crown Prince of Terror, survived CIA attempts to kill him in 2019, which the State Department stated that he's dead. So if the people believe he's dead, we don't have to worry about him. Oh, wait a minute, he's alive. The claims he is secretly running Al-Qaeda are worsened by intelligence reports. His brother Abdullah is also entrenched in the network. It means that their father has spawned a terrorist network and hell-bent on attacking them. Between them, they have developed 10 major Al-Qaeda terror training camps, as Sarah Adams reported, and have forged global links with other West-hating groups, as Sarah Adams reported in the book Tracking the Base, Al-Qaeda 2.0. Analysis suggests that the 34-year-old Hamza spends most of his time in Jalalabad. By the way, Pakistan, considered the tentative country that the United States, the CIA, basically has a relationship with. And we didn't attack them after 9/11. Meanwhile, they're the ones who, funded Jaish-e-Mohammed in Kashmir. They're the ones who created that group. They also accelerated the rise of the Taliban, which now has taken over Afghanistan. The Haqqani network under Jalaluddin Haqqani in the 1980s, they were having a indirect, very tentative relationship with, allowed these groups to exist, and now they're the fucking forces of the fucking Middle East. Why didn't we go to war against Saudi Arabia and Pakistan? We wouldn't be having this problem today. But it would also be a threat to Israel because Israel considers westernized Arab states as threats. Why? Because they're educated. And education is power, because information is power. And the only democracy in the Middle East has to be Israel. Fuck everybody else. Why? Because they're brown, because they're Muslim, because they don't look like us. They don't think like us. And of course, you have a ruling elite in Israel, now growing, these Kahanas that basically believe that God has given them the right to kill all these people because they're not human. They basically are saying it in the Knesset. The report seen by the Monitor says Hamza bin Laden is not only alive, but actively involved in Al-Qaeda's resurgence. A fact, that means they saw classified information and are allowed to report on certain things that are not classified. A fact well known among senior Taliban leaders. These leaders engage with him. The Haqqanis, right? Engage with him, holding regular meetings and securing him and his family. It highlights a deep connection between Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, one that is crucial for Western governments to understand. Hamza has ascended to the leadership of Al-Qaeda, steering it toward the most potent. This is the reason why I think the Taliban set up al-Zawahiri, because he's the emir of Al-Qaeda, but he's also old. And because he's wanted, they probably gave him a house on the same street as some of the Taliban leaders, and somehow intelligence escaped and a precision missile killed him. I believe that's true. He is dead. Same thing with Bin Laden. Yes, he's dead. But they did it in such a way where basically we're not going to show you that he's dead because you'll always believe the stupid conspiracies or the conspiracies that make you question, is he really dead? Maybe the State Department has him hidden. No, they're really dead. So that you could say now Al Qaeda is dead. And so you don't have to worry about them anymore. Meanwhile, what's happening in the background? Al Qaeda's not really dead. It's that the Bin Laden family are still alive. They're young and they need to regroup. But we need the world to believe that they're not alive, that they are dead, and that the group is dead. Fast forward a couple years later, Al Qaeda is now more powerful than fucking ever, and all of a sudden people have, they don't have they have these memory loss. Well, what happened? It highlights a deep connection between Al Qaeda and the Taliban, one that is crucial for Western governments to understand. Hamza has ascended to the leadership of Al Qaeda, not Saif al-Adil, because, like I said in the previous video, I talked about Saif al-Adil not being favored by Bin Laden in the Abbottabad papers that were found by the U.S. government after they killed him, where Bin Laden basically says, and I have the papers too. You know, they're also translated, right? Um, where Bin Laden says that Saif al-Adil is not. He's got the experience, but he's not long range leadership and steering it toward the most powerful resurgence since the Iraq War. And this is there he is, Hamza bin Laden, right? What did John Torrio, basically say, to Al Capone? He said, "This is a young man's game. You take over the operation." And then Al Capone became the leader of the Chicago mob. Under his command, Al Qaeda is regrouping and preparing for future attacks on Western targets. Hamza is driven by a powerful determination to continue the legacy of his father, which adds a symbolic and strategic weight to his actions. Moreover, Hamza's brother, Abdullah bin Laden, plays a crucial role in the revival because this makes sense. The Transnational Atlantic Council is something I agree with them regarding why Hamza's the real emir. He's younger. He also has his father's name, which is respected across the board. It's like, you know, having the name of Gotti, I guess, if we want to talk. No, let's talk. No, it's terrible because his sons weren't as respected within the organization. But if we go to the Rothschilds, I guess, right? It's some nefarious group with a name you're like, oh shit, right? Another report says the camps train fighters and suicide bombers and teach them how to slip out of Afghanistan to launch threats against Western targets. It is thought up to 21 terror networks are operating in Afghanistan, turning the country into the world's biggest terror hotspot. And we don't have any signals intelligence there. I mean, like on human intelligence. I don't know if we have informants, just like we did in Al Qaeda training camps, like like in the 80s and early 90s. I don't think we do, but it would be hard pressed not to think that we don't have signals intelligence. Think these guys are talking on cell phones and email? I mean, we're more connected now than ever before. But are they talking about operations on the phones like they did in the Al Qaeda communications hub in Yemen in 2000, 2001? The latest assessments say Al Qaeda is working with the Islamic State, sparking growing fears of another 9/11 style attack on the West. Now, this is from the Ali Soufan Center. Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula ramps up its anti Western propaganda campaign. I showed you this article in the previous, but I didn't really get into it. But, Al Qaeda Arabian Peninsula, which is at the forefront of the campaign as the most aggressive and encouraging violence, has called for attacks by Muslims in the United States and Europe for supporting Israel and encouraged the targeting of Jews living in the West. So we have Al Qaeda in Yemen. We have Al Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. We have Al Qaeda in Afghanistan. We have Al Qaeda in Niger, Al Qaeda in the Sudan, Al Qaeda in Libya, all working together, and Syria, all working together. This is far, infinitely more dangerous than anything Bin Laden ever dreamed, ever dreamed. And finally, fact sheet from the Homeland Security. Okay. Fiscal year 2023. Numbers show worst year at America's borders ever. This is what I'm talking about. How would terrorists from Afghanistan and Syria get here? Through two borders, one Canadian, two Mexico. Now, it's not a conspiracy theory to think that leaders of the Sinaloa cartel or the CNCG would work with Arabic terrorist fundamentalist organizations for the price of good money, because more money's made on human cargo than there is in cocaine or methamphetamine, because human cargo can be deported and then come back into the country for the same price as a kilo or even more, because human cargo keeps returning back as long as they're being deported. Makes sense, right? The House Committee on Homeland Security released its latest starting stat fact sheet outlining U.S. Customs and Borders protocols in September fiscal year 2023 border data. And what does it say? Key facts. Encounters at the southwest border increased over 40% compared to 2022. Last month, U.S. Customs and Border Protection reported a 40% increase compared to September 2021. Since President Biden took office, there have been 7.5 million encounters worldwide, nationwide, and 6.2 million encounters at the southwest border. That's a lot of fucking people, right? 6.2 million people. And we're not even talking about Trump's presidency in 2016. In fiscal year 2023, look at this. 169 individuals whose names appear on the terrorist watch list. Let's open this link, right? I mean, holy shit. Terrorist screening data set encounters, southwest border. Look at all these encounters by fiscal year of 2017 to 2023. Northern border, Canada, southern border. I mean, unbelievable. It's just unreal. I really. So far in fiscal year 2023, the CPB has arrested 35,433 aliens with criminal convictions or outstanding warrants nationwide. These are gang members, Sinaloa cartel, CNG, and Los Zetas, whatever, right? Or even affiliates within, say, La M or Nuestra Familia, gangs inside the United States that have a connection with these southern borders. And, they don't care. They hate the government. And so what do? We'll just acquiesce, we'll affiliate with these Arab terrorist organizations for a good price. And, I can make up a lot of scenarios. For one, I don't like to cause fear and paranoia. Um, um, I'm somebody who deals in absolutes. mostly. Okay. I like to have an informed public. It's how we're going to get power back from the government. We can't do it violently. We're not going to win. First of all, we're too divided. And second of all, violence begets violence. If anything, empathy has to win here because apathy is what is causing the discord and the violence that we see today. And no entity on the face of the earth has more apathy than the US federal government, especially those in the highest positions of Congress. They're evil, immoral. My psychology for me is that I can familiarize with sociopathy because I can see why the government does these things. Like I look at people, I'm like, maybe we deserve to die. Maybe we deserve to be destroyed because when I look at all the stupidity and ignorance in society today, it's just like it's like, would it be more merciful just to end it? But then you look at children; they don't deserve this, and so I realize that this sociopathy apathy has to be destroyed because if not, it will destroy human life, human existence. And so I will continue to make videos trying to give hope and be emphatic to those who are the lights of the future, which are young people. And there are, and even though they're a shrinking minority, there are older people who are emphatic, who deserve, credit, who deserve to be in the fight, but they're probably thinking that they're alone. And I think a terrorist attack will happen here, and it's going to be blamed on Iran, Lebanon, and this will cause the United States to go to war, destroy the only Shia-led country, and then have a Western-backed government leading it, Israeli supported, Gulf supported, and then what will happen? Well, we'll go to war with the Gulf because they're brown, they're Muslim, and they'll be easy to destroy, and we'll take over their oil fields. And then there'll be only two forces left: the growing resentment of Jews from this monstrosity, and they're not right wing. I don't know what these people are, but they're monsters that will create the ultimate war, of which most religious evangelicals and most of the Kahanists want, which is the end of the war between Israel and the United States. Because this growing resentment that's growing in the White House in the background, like I mentioned before, is this hatred for Jews, not Zionists, but for Jews. Because when you look at the destabilization of Muslim countries, and some people are just getting sick and tired of it, well, they're voicing their opinion. I'm starting to see this online. And it's a worry because I'm looking, as a very pessimistic person, I'm looking 10 years, 20 years down the road to see what's going on. And like I said, I could be totally wrong, dead wrong about everything. But I think what's making sense is what's coming. And there will be a reckoning here in the United States because, what I think with the terrorist attacks that are coming, the COVID mandates are basically the test to see what people will put up with and what they wouldn't. And we failed that regard. And they know that now. And I think those mandates will come, and then there'll be a blame game. The conservatives will blame the Biden supporters. This is what happened. This is what happened with the borders. You allow these people to come in. We should never have a Democratic, president again. How do we do that? We don't have elections anymore. People will support it, just like we supported the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act and the invasive civil liberties of our privacy regarding the NSA, not using a warrant to collect all our emails and text messages and store it at the Utah data center. We allowed for this to happen, and we will allow far more. but we have to fight. And even if we lose, we can say we always tried. All right, guys, listen, thank you very much for tuning into the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great weekend, everybody.